In this pod-slice summary of the PBD podcast, Patrick Bet-David hosts 3 guests who share their personal experiences and insights on gender identity, transitioning, and the industry revolving around these topics. The first guest, Ollie London, is a British YouTuber who had been designated male at birth, but started transitioning to female in 2018. However, he reverted to male again in 2022. He has documented his journey in his book, Gender Madness. According to Ollie, his struggles with identity, stemming from his teenage years and fueled by societal and familial pressures, led him on a journey through surgeries that he started finding addictive. However, he became disillusioned with his path, recognizing the emptiness and unhappiness it brought him. Luka, Hein, the second guest, shared her experience as a detransitioner. She received a double mastectomy at 16 and pursued hormonal treatments later, only to detransition at age 20. She went on to sue her doctors for rushing her into gender-affirming treatment. Luka described how medical professionals and therapists, in her experience, affirmed her desires to transition without thorough exploration. She calls attention to the coercion and manipulation utilized by some medical professionals to push for transition, often citing the fear of suicide. The last guest, Erin, is a lawyer and activist who is also a parent of a formerly gender-confused child. Erin's story highlights her fight for children and adults struggling with gender identity issues, emphasizing her critical perspective on how schools and the medical industry could be contributing factors to children's confusion. Throughout the podcast, Patrick Bet-David also weighs on the rapidly growing industry surrounding transition processes, citing concerning data points. The hormone replacement therapy market size in 2019 had hit $10.2 billion, growing at a rate of 6.1%. Additionally, the male-to-female gender reassignment procedure segment was valued at $85 million, only in 2019, implying a massive increase in demand. The podcast indicates an alarming trend where societal, familial, and internal pressures collaborate with a highly profitable industry, making the process of transitioning appear as the only solution without providing adequate support, counseling, or thorough examination of the individual's circumstances. Erin, mother and lawyer, discusses her personal journey after her daughter expressed her wish to transition. The school, much to her disbelief, had already started referring to her child by a different pronoun and name, all without consulting or even informing her. She echoes the sentiments of Luka, reminiscing on her own experiences confronting a complacent medical infrastructure. Erin bitterly notes that every single doctor and psychologist saw fit to affirm her child's decision, with some even accusing her of concocting false memories about her daughter's childhood. Further, she was hit with the alarming suicide statistics of transgender individuals, sought as a manipulative tactic to convince her to affirm her child's transition. Erin also touches on an alarming phenomenon where pressure to transition is placed not only on the child but also on the parents. Legal incidents such as her receiving a visit from Child Protective Services and the police for not affirming her child's transition illustrate the extent of these pressures. Discussing their strategic response against these forces, Erin and her husband made a conscious shift from a defensive stance to an offensive one. She created and proposed 6 bills to push for parental notification policies, which are now being implemented in schools across California. The commendable effort proves a significant milestone in her fight. Erin also highlights how this controversy has united parents across different political affiliations, all striving to safeguard their children. She reveals that while the media has been successful in silencing voices like hers, parents, Democrats, and Republicans alike are firmly standing against the blind promotion of gender transition. Continuing the conversation, they discuss the situation in California from a policy perspective. Despite one win against a potentially harmful bill, which would legally encourage transition in case of a divorce, they discuss several troublesome bills that have been signed into law. For instance, Bill AB 665, referred to as state-sanctioned kidnapping, allows 12-year-olds to voluntarily move to state facilities without any claim of parental abuse. This demonstrates the increasing state intervention in children's identity crises, often at the expense of the family's rights and well-being. The conversation eventually segues towards discussing the dynamic between parental relationships and children's decisions to transition. The mention of these patterns instigates a pivot towards understanding the deeper reasons and circumstances leading kids towards identity crises. Guest Ollie London, artist and ex-transgender influencer, discusses his personal experiences growing up. He recounts a strained relationship with his emotionally abusive father, who, he felt, attempted to mold him into his masculine image against Ollie's wishes. Instead, Ollie found himself more drawn towards feminine figures like his mother. He believes this absence of a positive male role model heavily influenced his identity crisis and decision to transition. Ollie suggests this might be a common phenomenon among many individuals who decide to transition, often stemming from broken homes and an absence of robust parental guidance. These experiences left a profound impact on Ollie, causing deep-rooted confusion about his gender identity. When Patrick Bet-David asks Ollie what advice he'd give individuals currently undergoing similar struggles, Ollie emphasizes the importance of finding strength within and focusing on a purpose in life. Overcoming feelings of loneliness and isolation by investing in a career, spiritual faith, or even a sport. Finding meaning beyond the confusion is a vital precursor to building resilience and moving forward. Addressing a comparison between the UK and US regarding transitioning incidents, Ollie notes an alarming trend in the US where transitioning amongst children appears to be more prominent. He shares disturbing statistics showing a recent sharp increase in the number of individuals identifying as transgender in the US. He talks about some potentially troubling policies being pushed in the UK, like allowing transgender patients into women's-only wards and others. However, Ollie also acknowledges that the UK is implementing measures to slow down this phenomenon, with the National Health Service banning puberty blockers for teens. But he warns against the potential dangers of blindly following trends constructed by US-dominated social media platforms. The conversation continues towards investigating possible root causes for children wanting to physically change their bodies. Ollie suggests that these inclinations could be more of a social contagion fueled by social media, pointing out that validation through likes and comments could be a strong motivator steering children towards such drastic decisions. This reality underscores the importance of parental and societal involvement in understanding and guiding children through their identity struggles. The discussion delves deeper into personal experiences impacting the decision to detransition, with Erin Friday and Luka Hein joining the conversation. Erin, an advocate and supporter of detransitioning, points out a distinct pattern among troubled kids who decide to transition, especially teenagers. For instance, an inclination towards anime, excessive consumption of pornography, introverted tendencies, and a strong influence of social media are all common characteristics. Luka shares a similar sentiment regarding the common thread among detransitioners, citing issues such as family life problems, internal or external homophobia, discomfort during puberty, and a longing for acceptance and affirmation as prevalent factors. Luka also emphasizes how transitioning often targets the most vulnerable individuals, which frequently involve adolescents ostracized from the social norms. This pursuit for validation is unfortunately fueled by a society that celebrates transition without fully understanding its profound consequences. A fascinating perspective emerged as Erin began to dissect the role parents play in this societal issue. She remarks that parents who take pride in having a transitioning child tend to display narcissistic characteristics. These parents seem to perceive their child's gender transition as a political statement of progressivism, creating a harmful cycle of ego-stroking. Moreover, Erin is particularly critical of parents who exploit their transitioning children as trophies for virtue signaling, which is an indicator of deeper psychological issues. Luka furthers this discussion, expressing concern over the potential consequences for children who are guided to believe their value lies solely in their trans identity. These insightful perspectives offer a fresh understanding into the phenomenon of transitioning and detransitioning while highlighting the importance of tackling these issues from the core, analyzing societal norms, the media, and parental guidance. The conversation then veers towards political tendencies and their possible impact on supporting changes in gender identity. There's an implicit suggestion that liberal-leaning parents may be more willing to affirm and encourage their children's transition, potentially due to ideological alignment. Critically, Luka emphasizes the distinct diversity among detransitioners, suggesting that a multitude of backgrounds, experiences, and influences can lead to the same path. Erin acknowledges the dangers lurking behind these well-meaning affirmations, pointing out that celebrations of transition can often be hollow and false, leading to a precarious sense of acceptance. This critical dialogue reinforces the need for conscious understanding and individual guidance in managing gender identity struggles, especially during the sensitive adolescent years. In the continuation of this enlightening discourse on the PBD podcast, the conversation deepens into the ramifications of transition affirmative actions on children, its social and psychological implications, as well as the conspicuous political divide transcending these issues. The discussion highlights the psychosocial complexities underlying the facilitation of transitions. Statements from guests Erin Friday and Luka Hein underline the damaging implications of affirming a child's distress over their gender identity. In this discussion, the parental affirmation of transitions in children serves as a derogatory validation of discomfort rather than a loving acceptance or support. Host Patrick Bet-David draws attention towards parental insecurities, proposing that the readiness to affirm a child's transition could be reflective of the parent's own unresolved issues. He ventures into the realm of suggestive manipulation, cleverly disguised as empathy aimed at exploiting vulnerable individuals and causing societal discord. The notion of fragmentation prevails, with hints at symbolic societal disintegration, from divorce and wedge driving between sexes to class wars and exclusion of religious faith from public spheres. This narrative implies the exploitation of divisive elements fueling societal unrest. Delving deeper into the impact of these dynamics, the guests explore the parents' willingness to facilitate transitions based on political ideologies. In this perspective, liberal-leaning parents come off as more accepting of their children's transitions, possibly because it aligns with their ideological leanings. Intriguingly, the discussion also highlights religion, framing the rising acceptance of the transgender movement as a non-theistic religion poised to replace traditional faith. Bet-David further scrutinizes the role of religion and faith, implying an inversely proportional relationship between the growth of LGBTQ plus acceptance and the diminishing belief in God. He posits that the dissolution of faith could create openings for manipulation, with a worryingly suggestive connection made between this increasing secularism amongst liberals and their likelihood to support transitions. The conversation also touches on the adverse effects of transitioning on health, such as joint and pelvic pain, as shared by Luka, who even had to take a break from school due to these issues. It then continues into the troubling realities existing in modern educational institutions promoting progressivism, often at the expense of scientific evidence. The discussion introduces detransitioners as the apostates of the new religion of transgenderism, noting their treatment with hostility and the aim to suppress their voices. The therapeutic tactics used to discourage detransitioning further imply the insidious drive to maintain an appearance of unity and success within the transition trend. This exploration unravels the disturbing machinations behind the celebrated acceptance and affirmation of transitions, bringing forward its controversial complexities and exposing the potentially damaging implications for our society, particularly our children. This expansive conversation on the PBD podcast continues into further disturbing developments as guests Erin and Luka Hein discuss their experiences and perspectives on targeting and sexualizing youth, especially within the transgender context. Hein discusses the harmful effects of dissociation, noting a concerning manipulation tool used by predators online. They specifically prey on young people who express discomfort and dissociation from their bodies, twisting parental protection into a negative light. A hard-hitting point delves extensively into the exploitation of youth for monetary gain. Bet-David ingeniously probes the motive behind the active promotion of transgenderism among youth. The guests surmise multiple motives, with Erin breaking it down into a multi-headed hydra analogy. Money forms the central pillar, with billions being made from vulnerable children and adults through gender reassignment surgeries, hormone replacements, and other health services catering to transgender individuals. The conversation moves into dangerous territories when the guest talks about how transitioning becomes a calling card for pedophiles. The predatory practices include luring kids into selling explicit pictures and coaxing them into hormone treatments to incite promiscuous behavior. Unsuspecting children, often suffering from existing mental health issues or autism, become targets, falling prey to schemes thinly veiled as support for their transition. Simultaneously, the socio-political climate perpetuates this situation, with companies and government entities funding this industry to appear socially progressive and to leverage prevailing trends for financial gains. Conversations reveal a chilling interpretation of the growing normalization of such practices, drawing parallels with cult behaviors and suggesting that this social trend could be part of a larger plot to destroy the normal. At a deeper level, Ollie London sheds light on how the transgender movement seems to mimic certain cult behaviors, such as recruiting members online, going after detractors, and encouraging believers to disassociate from their bodies. This is followed by Erin highlighting how faith-based views traditionally consider the body and soul as an inseparable entity, while the trans narrative seems to disrupt this unity. At the core, the young and vulnerable, especially those with existing troubles, become victims. Creating permanent patients severely impacts their mental and physical well-being, feeding into a ruthless cycle that compromises their health, impedes scientific progress, and normalizes coercive victimization under the guise of empathy and support. The conversation on the PBD podcast took a dense turn as they delved into how the gender transitioning process becomes a monetary pipeline in multiple hidden ways. Erin detailed how parents with transgender children are often forced into extensive parenting courses and legal battles to regain custody. Additionally, prisons pay for gender transformations for men looking to gain access to women's prisons. The hormone company, Plume, is also implicated, with discussions pointing out their unethical practice of sterilizing patients, then offering to assist them in purchasing a baby when they're ready. Their disturbing experiences in the transition loop include misguided healthcare professionals, unprepared to assist patients after unsuccessful transitions due to a devastating lack of protocol. Detransitioners like Luka expressed being left in distress and pain without substantial medical help. Shockingly, it was alluded that hospitals might be ignoring detransitioners to maintain favorable data and statistics, further sidelining already marginalized individuals. They discussed the existence of an online Reddit group of 50,000 detransitioners, reinforcing their point of a silent majority struggling in the dark corners of society. The group serves as a beacon of hope for these individuals, left to pick up the pieces following a tumultuous and often damaging transition process. One alarming observation made was how the transgender journey often mimics cult behaviors. The guests discussed how transgender individuals are pulled in during their darkest hour, and then cast aside when complications arise, left dealing with the real ramifications of transitioning, including joint and pelvic pain, potential infertility, and experience of trauma. In several cases, the medical professionals were seen abdicating responsibility, pinning decisions to transition on the individuals themselves, and completely ignoring their role in the situation. The panel concluded that these harrowing consequences tragically represent the underbelly of the socio-political movement, leaving members grappling with their new reality. The PBD podcast discussion offered profound insights into the intricacies of gender transitioning. More importantly, the shocking reality and repercussions of the process. Erin pointed out that the transition from female to male involves a series of surgeries that leave extensive scarring and are associated with a high complication rate. She discussed the gruesome details of repeated revisions and surgeries, emphasizing the lack of ready assistance from the medical community. Guests on the podcast further revealed that surgery doesn't spell the end of the ordeal for those who transition. They provided unsettling details about how transitioning individuals face lifelong pain due to the physical changes. Trans male victims of phalloplasty were said to experience incontinence and cramps, while trans females must continually use a dilator to maintain their surgery's integrity. Disturbingly, the conversation exposed that these individuals often don't have access to medical help post-transition, further exacerbating their struggles. Once the procedure is done, the medical community's involvement reportedly dissipates, leaving them to manage their situation. The central part of the podcast discussion was the realization that young children being transitioned would never be exposed to orgasm due to the invasive surgeries they undergo. As these children are transitioned before reaching the age to comprehend the implications fully, their consent raises ethical questions. The hosts argued that there's no age-appropriate way to communicate to a child the complete loss of their sexual function that transitioning brings. The guests also lamented how these procedures are destroying not just the sexual function, but also undermining the fertility of these young kids before they have a chance to decide for themselves. Patrick revealed that in some U.S. states, sex reassignment surgeries on minors are permitted even without parental approval. A direct consequence of these lax laws is the mobilization of runaway minors towards states that allow transition, creating a sanctuary state for trans youth. Though primarily observed in states like California and Minnesota, the phenomena are prevalent across multiple states, further endangering children's futures. The guest referenced a documentary titled No Way Back, which explores the lives of detransitioners and examines the long-term impacts of transitioning procedures. Despite providing valuable insights, the film was canceled due to pressure from activist groups. This incident underscores the necessity to maintain open dialogue about the controversial subject, which often remains hidden under societal threads for fear of backlash or stigmatization. Erin enlightened the audience on the experiences of detransitioners, or people who reverse the process of gender transitioning. In spite of numerous interviews with the New York Times, Erin's story remains untold, an act she referred to as hiding one of the best-kept secrets. She expressed the concern that outlets like the Washington Post won't even use the term detransitioner, showing a hesitance to even acknowledge the existence of people who regret transitioning. She painted a gripping picture of the struggles parents face, from losing custody of their children for refusing to use their preferred pronouns, to finding themselves unable to protect their kids from the irreversible procedure. Guests recounted their experiences on communities like Reddit, with members seeking comfort and companionship on their journey. However, Patrick suggested several pillars that would prove beneficial to detransitioners: love and support from a community, faith in a higher power, fighters who advocate for their rights, and also finding inspirations from others who vigorously face similar struggles. He commended the young guest Luka for sharing such personal experiences at just 21, an age where many are still figuring themselves out. They also touched on the reality of some detransitioners who had begun their transitioning process as adults, indicating that their experiences might differ from those who started at a younger age. However, regardless of when they commenced, the difficulties they face are very real and deeply challenging. By the end of the podcast, both hosts and guests encouraged listeners to ask questions and explore the topic more. With sources like Erin and Luka willing to share their experiences and a platform like the PBD podcast to facilitate the conversation, they implored the audience to take advantage of these resources. It was also highlighted that parents should engage in these discussions with their offspring, and more of such dialogues should be initiated within families and among peers. The hosts ended this part of the discussion by urging other podcasters and media outlets to share stories of detransitioners. They argued that podcasters' influence often surpasses that of mainstream media and insisted that engaging in such conversations is a robust means of bringing these stories to light. The narrative was concluded by thanking the guests for their honest and courageous testimonies and encouragement for more people to share their experiences. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of The Pod Slice.